Our speaker this morning is the Reverend Sally Beth Stone Shore. Reverend Shore grew up in central North Carolina, graduated from the university there, and joined the U.S. Peace Corps as a forestry volunteer in Mali. She was ordained to the Unitarian Universalist ministry in 2013 after receiving her Master's of Divinity from Meadville Lombard Theological School. She holds an MS in Environmental Science from UNC, and she is in final fellowship with the UUA, having served 6 UU congregations, most recently Brevard, North Carolina, where she was intern minister in 2019-20. Currently, she consults as a professional appreciative inquiry facilitator and trainer, and is finishing a master's degree in organizational development from Case Western Reserve University. She views ministry as a natural extension and expansion of her environmentalism, practicing love for the earth and its inhabitants. Her other loves are gardening, bicycling, music, her husband of 30 years, and their 3 adult children. She was not available to present in person or via Zoom, so she recorded this sermon specifically for us this morning.
Hello, La Crosse, and visitors, and anyone else, wherever you might be. This is Sally Beth Shore. Thank you for the introduction, I think. And I'm coming to you canned from Asheville, North Carolina. I really apologize that I'm unable to be with you, at least live in time, if not live in space. I'd love to see you through my screen, or at least those tiny little Zoom boxes. I am so grateful that Reverend Mills and Amanda were willing to extend an invitation to me to preach, even though I would have to offer this as a canned sermon. And I remind myself, nevertheless, what a miracle it is to be alive in an era where we can communicate across time and space. If you have a response that you would like to offer me, I encourage you to get in touch with Amanda, who knows about my email address and my website, heartofwarabah.com. Anyway, since I am, as I record, preaching to an empty kitchen, except for the mess behind the camera, I'm just going to try to imagine a multitude of smiling, encouraging faces in front of me, with only a very few of you nodding off to sleep. However, if you are one of the ones that nod off to sleep, don't worry. Remember, I can't see you. I'm here to talk to you today about hope in the time of climate change. It's a subject that's near and dear to me, and in fact, it's why I entered the ministry. But that's another sermon, and I won't bore you with that. But hope is a popular topic for sermons, particularly for Unitarian Universalists, and I think that's all well and good. That's as it should be, because we are historically a group of people who believe in and actively work for a better world. We've been trafficking in hope since Christianity's beginnings, because we had hope that the church could be different, that all people could believe in a common God, a common origin, a common love, and that salvation was for everyone. And age after age, over these past 2 millennia, by affirming that belief, we offered hope, the possibility that tolerance and universal brotherhood could become the norm rather than the exception. And I know we face many challenges these days that have us wondering. The long list of social ills, and of course prominent in many minds right now, the war in the Ukraine, has us scratching our heads and wondering, where is there hope? How can I find hope? I think maybe it's helpful to back up for a moment, and before we ask the question of how do we find hope, think about why we should have hope. Hope is, to my mind, at least I've come to believe, a winning strategy, a strategy from which we will be able to have a desirable future unfold. This is particularly important to understand, I believe, as we face the issue and how to address climate change. You know, religion, among its many functional purposes, offers multiple pathways for finding hope. I think the Buddhists might say that by living in the present, we can have hope, as suffering comes from our living in the past or our imaginations, our projections about the future. People of the Abrahamic faiths might say that all hopes come from the one God, in which all things are possible. And we can be hopeful, we can find hope in the fact that God heals, that God creates miracles, etc. And having hope offers motivation for adherence to the faith. Some may find hope in the idea of eternal life, which has always kind of frightened me, but again, that's for another sermon. But why do we have hope, especially as today's Unitarian Universalists? Well, my answer is that we are pragmatists. And no matter what our personal theologies are, hope works. Julie Merrick is a member of the Magic Valley UU Fellowship in Idaho, and she has said that hope whispers that there is love and light and possibility present in this moment and calls our attention there. That's one of the first ways that hope works, by changing where and what we attend to. And I also love this definition, given by the popular 1960s humorist Jean Carr. It's a little bit before my time, but maybe some of you knew who she was or know who she was. She wrote that hope is the feeling you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. Hope is the feeling you have that the feeling you have isn't permanent. And I have a great illustration of what I think this looks like in action. Because a colleague of mine works in suicide prevention. And recently she told me about a simple intervention to support a change in people's trajectory. When someone comes to her saying, "I don't want to live anymore," she works with them to rephrase it to, "I don't want to live like this anymore." Did you catch it? That simple addition of two words, "like this anymore," that made room for a possibility that life could be experienced differently. That, I believe, is exactly the power of hope. Making room for a possibility that things can be different. Operating from a place where the probability of a good outcome is greater than zero. Well, great, you say. I get how that might work for people personally, but come on, Sally Beth, what does any of this have to do with climate change? I'm going to tell you. You see, for years, I was one of those people who sought to bludgeon the unbelievers with ever-growing piles of data and predictions of dire consequences should we not repent from our CO2 spewing ways. I was personally trained by Al Gore to spread the gospel of inconvenient truths. And between 2007 and 2017, I gave dozens of presentations using his slides as part of the Climate Reality Project. Maybe some of you have done the same thing as well. I know thousands and thousands of presenters have been trained by now. It was good work, and I'm proud of it. And I think the fact that an overwhelming majority of Americans now do say that they are worried about climate change. It's quite a measure of the success of that project. However, as Yuval Noah Harari has written recently, many of us seem to have gone straight from denial to despair. In 2012, the Israeli behavioral economist Dan Ariely gave the commencement address at my daughter's high school graduation. And he had this to say about climate change. If you were to search the world over for the one problem that would maximize human apathy, you would come up with global warming. Why? Why, think about it. It's long in the future. It will happen to other people. We don't see it progressing. We don't see anybody suffering. And anything we would do as individuals is a drop in the bucket. Can people under those conditions care? Most likely not. Well, a lot of things have changed in the past 8-9 years since 2013. And unfortunately, there has literally been much more water under the bridge, many more floods, and many more fires on the land since then, much of it being traced back to climate change. A lot more people care, whether it's because of that or other reasons, but a lot more people do care in 2013. But the truth is, I never quite agreed with Aureli's contention that apathy was the issue. It was more that last point about being a drop in the bucket. People cared, but they didn't think that they could make much of a difference. Agency, not apathy, is the issue. It's like this, we and all those other climate reality presenters, and so many of us who have been worried about climate change for some time, have done a great job convincing people of the risk of global warming. But with so many things, overshoot happened. And for that reason, many people now feel doomed and hopeless. And I think that has actually contributed to the epidemic and depression that we now find ourselves in. Granted, there's also been a major world pandemic, and we live in an era of social division. However, I think particularly among our youth, we live in this era where they feel like the future is doomed. And this actually worries me more than climate change itself. Because I fear we are becoming a nation of victims, of people who have lost hope, lost faith in our own agency. But again, that's another sermon. I do think the strategy to overcome this, though, is to cultivate hope. Let us dare. This is a world leader in organization development, David Cooper-Ryder, who 30 years ago created Appreciative Inquiry, a unique approach to problem solving, which has been used around the world, bringing people together to create positive futures that they collaborate on. It works because it is inclusive and because it taps into the people, into the energy that arises when people work from a standpoint of strengths, what they have to contribute, where they have succeeded in the past, and how and envisioning the future together. They dare to dream that a good future is possible. That people will come together and solve and adapt to climate change is not a given. But if it happens, it won't happen because we know it will happen, but because we think we see possibilities. And in seeing these possibilities, it will literally change how we think. And that vision will call us forward. Let me explain a little bit more what I mean by that. Cognitive science has increasingly found that emotions drive change inside and out. At any given time, our feelings largely determine what areas of our brain we can access, what neurons will fire and what neurons will fire together, and even how parts of our bodies work. It was over 30 years ago when Martin Seligman discovered that dogs, after a certain number of unsuccessful tries to achieve a treat goal, would just give up and no longer aspired for the treat, even when success was demonstrably in their grasp. He called this learned helplessness. But fortunately, he did not stop his research there, but he changed it, going on to look at how people could learn to be optimistic, creating a whole theory. Seligman went on to become the father of a new positive psychology movement, and it's ushered in a new generation of brain and psychology research whose fruits we are only just now beginning to see. It's helped me a lot to understand how so much of our creative abilities, ability to solve problems, desire to engage with others, to work, to share what we believe, and to have a hopeful outlook. It's helped me to understand how we can generate these things. One great finding is how vision, literally the pictures in our heads, inspire change. You know, the words we use and we share are really just representations of the pictures in our brains. And then once we have them up there, we look for and reinforce them in the world. Anybody Yellow car? Remember when you bought the yellow car? How suddenly yellow cars appeared everywhere? That was our brain reinforcing the image that was in our head. So what we dare to envision, we actually start to look for out in the world. And then when we find more of it in the world, we blow it up bigger, we reinforce it and move towards the vision, good or bad. About 12 years ago, the great environmentalist Paul Hawken, if you don't know who Paul Hawken is, look him up. He's definitely worth looking up in a number of great books. Paul Hawken said this: when asked if I am pessimistic or optimistic about the future, my answer is always the same. If you look at the science about what is happening on Earth and aren't pessimistic, you don't understand data. But if you meet the people who are working to restore this Earth and you aren't optimistic, you haven't got a pulse. What I see everywhere in the world are ordinary people willing to confront despair, power, and incalculable odds in order to restore some semblance of grace, justice, and beauty to this world. I recall UU Julie Merrick's quote, "Hope whispers that there is light and love and possibility present in this moment and calls our attention there." Hawkins challenges us to put love and light and possibility into our issue of climate change. Where will you put your focus? We have a choice about what we attend to. When we stand on the foundation of hope to look out, we are elevated, and it causes us to see the world differently. The former National Geographic photographer DeWitt Jones offers this assignment. Go out and find beauty. Take a picture of it. Keep it in your brain. By celebrating what is right with the world, he says, we find the energy to fix what's wrong. In this way, we start to see that hope is really a verb, a practice that can make a difference. Because with climate change, well, okay, let's go back to the story you heard earlier. Good, bad, who knows? Well, I think we can probably both agree that climate change is bad. Nevertheless, could you hold open the possibility that perhaps we can create good outcomes? What is possible as we address climate change? And what are you choosing to practice and in so doing to spread? Because possibilities will not come from despair. I believe that one of the bravest, most, what's the word I'm looking for? I'll find it later. One of the bravest things that we can do is to spread a little hope. Earlier, I quoted a phrase from an article by Yuval Noah Harari in the January 18th edition of Time. The title of that article, again, you should look it up, it's great. The surprisingly low price tag for preventing climate disaster. The whole paragraph reads, a few years ago, it was common to hear people deny climate change, downplay the enormousness of the threat, or argue that it was far too soon to worry about it. Now many people say it's too late. The apocalypse is coming and there is nothing we can do to prevent it. Despair is as dangerous as denial, and it is equally false. In the article, he presents compelling economic evidence about the investments needed and the great returns for those investments that will come from addressing climate change. There's no way to know if this is true or not, but I do know that Harari is no slouch. You probably heard of him. He's the best-selling author of *Sapiens*. Even so, if you are already convinced that there is no hope, you're not going to find any water in this argument. And if you look on the comments of his article, you'll find plenty of "the apocalypse is coming" talk. Let's go get a beer. Why is this? Do these people who have made that comment, who have those opinions, really know the future? Or is this because of our tendency to dismiss evidence, even well-documented evidence, when it doesn't fit our preconception? For those who have adopted the "it's too late" stance, mere evidence is not going to be persuasive. Perhaps it's also just psychologically safer to be negative, right? I mean, after all, if you predict doom, doom doesn't come, you might be wrong, but hey, things are pretty good. Doom didn't come. But offering a possibility of success, victory, or good times ahead is riskier, because should the opposite come to pass, it's big doo-doo for you. And to be fair, in some circumstances, it is vital that we prepare for the worst. Think about hurricane evacuations. However, it's been demonstrated that as humans, we are actually loss averse. We hate to lose much more than we love to win. And so it's safer to make predictions of doom, right? Similarly, John Tierney discusses in the 2019 book, we like to feel smart. In his 2019 book, the book is not We Like to Feel Smart. The book is The Power of Bad. And he discusses that we like to feel smart. And we tend to view those that take on a critical voice, which generally that would be the unhopeful voice. Oh, there's no way that can happen. We can't do that. We tend to see these people as smarter. Is it possible that fear of failure actually bars us from being hopeful? Is it possible that a fear of looking dumb actually bars us from spreading the possibility that good things can happen? Now, in these cases, I'm not talking about blithely predicting success, but just a more gentle notion. The idea that desirable future state is even possible. It was 15 or so years ago when I was teaching environmental science in several North Carolina prisons. My first class consisted of young men ages 18 to 21-year-olds who they segregated from the rest of the prison population. Not surprisingly, most came in having no knowledge of environmental issues, and most came from pretty unencouraging backgrounds. Justin was one of the brightest of the bunch. He was smart-alecky and confrontational. And he had some pretty deep skepticism initially about the science I was sharing. But he easily went from denial to despair, saying, "Nobody knows about this stuff. It doesn't matter what we do. We are doomed." It was he who polled 70 of his fellow inmates about their knowledge of global warming, finding that only 15% of them had heard the term. He was scheduled for release the day after the class ended, and the last thing he told me was, "I'm going to Florida to start over. I hope to find work in the solar energy industry there." I don't know if that worked out for Justin, but I often think about him. But I do know that right now, 15 years later, there is an incredible solar energy industry out there, one that is 100 times larger than what was predicted as possible at the time. And that industry needs people like Justin. I also know that that industry was not launched by people who thought that they did not have a chance of success. And get this, right now, around the globe, there are people working in every walk of life, in every industry, who believe in the possibility of success in the work to combat climate change. Millions of heroes have already been activated because they believe success is possible. But we need billions. How will we activate them? Will we create a sustainable Earth, one where temperatures and climate are stable enough to allow success and thriving for both humans and other products of millennia of holy evolution to flourish? I don't know, but I'm bullish, and I'm in it to win it. Practicing hope is not for sissies. It's not so we can sleep better at night. It's not so we can experience less stress or fight the good fight. Although without a doubt, those would be some collateral benefits. Without practicing hope, we will not find the energy, creativity, collaborative drive, or possibility to get up and do what needs to be done to take on this great work. And who are we as Unitarian Universalists to take on this great work? Well, our Unitarian and Universalist forebears had real hope that the church could be reformed, that the dire poverty and social ills of 19th century America could be bettered. And more recently, Unitarian Universalists saw that civil rights could be broadened to include everyone. And say what you like, in this age of woke, progress has been real. And we march on. It is in the best of our tradition to practice and to deepen our practice of hope. In this time of climate change, we as Unitarian Universalists have a mission to empower ourselves and others with this abiding and risky practice of hope, and to spread it in spite of the allure of wanting to be sure that we are right, in spite of the allure of seeming erudite. We could be wrong, but let us dare, no matter what we think the odds are. Because after all, think about the unpredicted explosion of the renewable energy industry. That's just one example. After all, we really aren't so good at knowing the odds anyway. There are some out there who would say we create the odds, just as we create the vision. Who knows what we can inspire by committing and recommitting to the great work in a hopeful way, with agency, with urgency, and with delight. What is sure is that today's hope and vision will create new possibilities for tomorrow that we can't yet imagine. Why bother to hope? Well, simply because it works. Out of the stars we have come. We have learned to be some of the world's most amazing problem solvers. In this era of hope, in the time of climate change, it's time that we turn on those skills to their fullest and solve our problem, not by focusing on the problems, but by focusing on what might be possible, what we could hope for. In your discussion after the sermon today, I hope you'll take up this question. What could the future look like if all possibilities were open? You can take it up or not. That's up to you. Again, I'm sorry I can't join you. I do thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Great star stuff people of faith, and people who believe in possibility. May peace be upon you, and may you have a good rest of your Sunday. Thank you.